The foods that could send you to hell. Picture this. You wake up tomorrow morning and reach for your coffee. Suddenly, church bells ring out across the land, and priests storm through your door, screaming that you've just condemned your soul to eternal damnation. You're dragged away in chains, branded a heretic, all because you wanted a cup of coffee. Sound insane? This was reality in medieval Europe. That innocent potato on your dinner plate. The devil's root spawned by Satan himself. Ice cream on a hot summer day. A sinful temptation designed to corrupt your soul. Even sugar, that sweet crystal we sprinkle on everything, was once considered so evil that monks would confess their sins and face punishment just for tasting it. For hundreds of years, the most powerful institution in Europe, the Catholic Church, waged war against foods we can't imagine living without today. They branded them as demonic, satanic, and capable of dragging your soul straight to hell. But here's the shocking twist. These very same foods would eventually save Europe from starvation and transform human civilization forever. How did a simple tomato become the devil's fruit? Why did coffee nearly start a religious war? And how did foods once banned by God's representatives on earth become the foundation of our modern diet? Welcome to the incredible true story of humanity's most forbidden foods. Let's start with sugar, the sweet powder that would reshape the world. When European crusaders first encountered refined sugar in the Middle East during the 11th century, they thought they'd discovered magic. These warriors, who only knew honey as a sweetener, stared in amazement at white crystals that dissolved on their tongues like edible diamonds. King Henry III of England called it the Stone of God. French nobles consumed it like medicine, believing it could cure diseases and grant eternal youth. The rich offered guests pieces of sugar as their most prized gift, more valuable than gold or jewels. But the church saw something sinister in this foreign powder. Sugar wasn't mentioned anywhere in the Bible. Worse, it came from Islamic lands, the same people Christians had been fighting for centuries. Most terrifying of all, sugar awakened human desires in ways that seemed unnatural and dangerous. Monks believed sugar broke their sacred vows of abstinence, tempting them into the deadly sins of gluttony and lust. In monasteries across Europe, sugar was banned outright. Any monk caught eating it had to confess their sin and face severe punishment. Some were forced to fast for weeks. Others were beaten. A few were even expelled from their orders entirely. But human desire proved stronger than religious fear. By the 15th century, Portuguese and Spanish colonies were mass-producing sugar using enslaved labor, dropping its price dramatically. Soon, it spread beyond the aristocracy into the middle class. When paired with other forbidden substances like coffee, tea, and chocolate, sugar became an everyday delight that no religious authority could stop. The sugar trade transformed entire cities. Marseille, London, and Amsterdam became wealthy beyond imagination, built on the sweet foundation of consumer culture, empire, and capitalism. The very substance once condemned as Satan's temptation became the economic engine of the modern world. Next comes the potato, perhaps the most misunderstood food in human history. Native to the Andes Mountains, it arrived in Europe during the mid-16th century aboard Spanish ships. Its appearance seemed designed to inspire fear. Muddy, knobby tubers growing underground like buried secrets. Europeans treated potatoes like poisonous weeds. Raw potatoes contained natural toxins that made people sick, so they were fed only to animals or the desperately poor. But religion amplified these fears into full-blown terror. Potatoes weren't mentioned in the Bible, which immediately made them suspect. Unlike proper crops that grew from seeds as God intended, potatoes multiplied from sliced tubers. In the Christian worldview, life should follow divine order through seeds blessed by the Creator. Potatoes seem to defy that sacred order. reproducing in ways that felt almost supernatural. People whispered that potatoes were plants spawned directly by the devil, sent to corrupt Christian souls. Some claimed that eating potatoes would turn you into a witch. Others believed they caused leprosy, madness, or eternal damnation. The fear was so intense that entire regions banned potato cultivation. France prohibited growing them for decades. In some German states, farmers were executed for planting potatoes. The church preached that anyone who ate the devil's root would be cast out of heaven forever. But desperation has a way of overcoming superstition. When famines struck Europe in the 17th and 18th centuries, starving people had to choose between religious purity and survival. They chose to live. Potatoes proved so nutritious and easy to grow that they single-handedly prevented millions of deaths from starvation. Then there's coffee, the dark brew that nearly started a religious war. Europeans first encountered it through Venetian traders in the 16th century. Known as the wine of Islam, coffee was dark, bitter, and had the mysterious power to keep people awake for hours. The church immediately branded it the devil's drink. It came from Muslim lands, the sworn enemies of Christianity. It heightened mental alertness in ways that felt unnatural and threatening. Most disturbing of all, Islamic mystics drank coffee to stay awake during nighttime prayers, using it as a tool for religious devotion. Christian leaders argued that true pious devotion should come from God's grace alone, not from some pagan brew that artificially stimulated the mind. Drinking coffee, they claimed, was like making a pact with Satan himself. The debate raged in the Vatican for years. Some cardinals wanted coffee banned throughout all Christian lands. Others worried that such a ban would be impossible to enforce. The controversy grew so intense that it threatened to split the church apart. Then something unexpected happened. Pope Clement VIII, the most powerful religious figure in the Christian world, decided to taste coffee himself before making a final judgment. He took one sip of the dark, bitter liquid, and his eyes widened in surprise. "This is so delicious," he declared, "that it should be baptized into Christianity and made a Christian beverage." With those words, the Pope single-handedly transformed coffee from Satan's drink into a gift from God. The ban was lifted immediately. Coffee spread rapidly across Europe, embraced even by priests and monks who found it incredibly useful for staying awake during long nights of prayer and sermon writing. Chocolate tells an equally dramatic story. Brought from the Aztec Empire, in the early 16th century, cacao was considered sacred by indigenous peoples, called the drink of the gods, or the blood of warriors. But when it first arrived in Europe, chocolate was bitter, spiced with chili peppers, and completely unlike anything Europeans had ever tasted. Some monks began using chocolate to stay awake during religious fasting, or to endure long periods of prayer. But its pagan origins and stimulating effects made church authorities deeply suspicious. Critics called it the blood of heathens, or a potion brewed by the devil himself. A fierce theological debate erupted over whether drinking chocolate broke the sacred rules of religious fasting. Some argued that any pleasure derived from food or drink violated the spirit of fasting, regardless of its physical properties. Others claimed that chocolate was so bitter and unpleasant that it actually enhanced the suffering required during fasting. The controversy ended when Pope Pius V agreed to taste chocolate and make an official ruling. After one sip of the bitter, unsweetened brew, he made his judgment. This liquid is so unpleasant that it clearly does not break the fast. The Pope had essentially ruled that chocolate was too disgusting to be sinful. But everything changed when Europeans began adding sugar to chocolate. The combination created something entirely new. A sweet, creamy drink that was both delicious and energizing. Nobles embraced it as the height of luxury, and chocolate houses became fashionable gathering places for the wealthy elite. The tomato might be the most ironic of all the forbidden foods. Native to Mexico and Peru, It first arrived in Spain as an ornamental plant, grown in gardens for its beautiful red color, rather than for eating. Europeans called it the poison apple and were terrified to consume it. Some people actually did die after eating tomatoes, but not because the fruit was poisonous. Wealthy Europeans served tomatoes on pewter plates that contained lead. The acid in tomatoes would leach the lead from the plates, causing fatal lead poisoning. But people blamed the tomatoes, not the plates. The tomato's appearance made it seem inherently evil. It wasn't mentioned in the Bible. It was blood red, the color associated with violence and sin. It came from pagan cultures that practiced human sacrifice. Most disturbingly, tomatoes were soft and fleshy in ways that seemed almost human. For centuries, tomatoes carried such a powerful satanic stigma that most Europeans wouldn't touch them. Only during times of extreme famine or war did people desperately turn to tomatoes for sustenance. But once they tasted them, everything changed. By the late 18th century, tomatoes had become central to Italian cooking. Today, it's impossible to imagine European cuisine without tomato sauce, pizza, or pasta with marinara. The devil's fruit became the foundation of some of the world's most beloved foods. Corn faced similar prejudice when it arrived from the Americas. The Maya and Aztecs had cultivated it as their primary staple for thousands of years, but Europeans distrusted anything that didn't resemble the biblical grains like wheat and barley mentioned in scripture. Corn kernels looked alien and unnatural to European eyes. At first, it was used only as animal feed, considered unfit for human consumption. Making matters worse, Europeans didn't know how to properly prepare corn, leading to outbreaks of pellagra, a disease that causes madness. This reinforced the belief that corn was cursed by the devil, that corn had advantages that couldn't be ignored. It was incredibly hardy, produced massive yields, and could grow in climates where other crops failed. By the 18th century, hunger overcame religious prejudice, and corn became a vital staple that prevented countless famines. Even garlic, used since ancient Egypt and Rome, fell out of favor in Christian Europe. Its pungent smell and intense flavor were seen as morally corrupting. Some monasteries banned garlic entirely, believing its strong odor would distract monks from prayer. Priests were forbidden from eating garlic before celebrating Mass, worried that the smell would offend God and the congregation. Nobles mocked garlic as peasant food, literally barring servants who smelled of garlic from entering their halls. But garlic's medicinal properties were undeniable. It cured illnesses, improved appetite, and enhanced the flavor of other foods so dramatically that it became essential to Mediterranean cooking. Chili peppers shocked Europeans with their fiery heat when they arrived in the 16th century. Unlike black pepper, which was a prized luxury spice, chilies were overwhelming. They burned the mouth, made people sweat and cry, and seemed to cause physical pain for no apparent reason. For church authorities, this was clear evidence of sin and temptation. Why would God create a food that caused suffering? Some religious texts actually called chilies the fruit of the devil, warning that their intensity could lead people astray from righteous living. But that same intensity made chilies irresistible. Within a single century, they had spread from Spain to Hungary to Asia, fundamentally transforming cuisines everywhere they went. The devil's fruit became essential to some of the world's most beloved dishes. The avocado faced perhaps the most embarrassing religious condemnation. When Spanish conquistadors first encountered it in Aztec lands, they were disturbed by both its appearance and its cultural significance. The Aztec name for avocado literally meant testicle, referring to its shape, and it played important roles in fertility rituals. Spanish missionaries immediately condemned the avocado as a fruit of lust and evidence of pagan sexual worship. They claimed that eating avocados would corrupt Christian souls and lead to immoral behavior. but the fruit's creamy texture and rich nutrients made it too valuable to ignore. Conquistadors secretly ate avocados despite religious prohibitions, and over time the fruit spread worldwide. Today, avocados are hailed as a superfood, essential to healthy diets everywhere. Even ice cream faced religious persecution. Introduced to Europe around the 13th century through travelers like Marco Polo, early ice cream was a luxury reserved for nobles wealthy enough to store ice year-round. But the church warned that ice cream's cold, sweet, sensual pleasure was designed to tempt women and children into sin. Priests argued that the fleeting pleasure ice cream provided on the tongue stirred dangerous desires that could lead to greater temptations. They claimed that anything so pleasurable must be spiritually corrupting, designed by Satan to weaken human resolve. But ice cream's appeal proved unstoppable. By the 17th century, street vendors were selling it in cities across Europe. With the Industrial Revolution came refrigeration, transforming ice cream from an elite luxury into an everyday treat enjoyed by people of all social classes. The pattern was always the same: fear, condemnation, gradual acceptance, and eventual embrace. These foods faced moral stigma through religious asceticism, social exclusivity, and literal interpretation of scripture. But no religious ban could outlast human reality. When faced with hunger, people consistently chose survival over faith. Nobles flaunted forbidden delicacies as symbols of their wealth and power. Monks quietly embraced practical benefits when no one was watching. Merchants transformed religious taboos into profitable opportunities. The foods once condemned as Satan's temptations now fill our tables without a second thought. Coffee fuels our mornings. Potatoes feed billions. Tomatoes are essential to cuisines worldwide. Chocolate is synonymous with love and celebration. Sugar sweetens everything we eat. These 10 foods are just the beginning. Bananas were considered exotic and dangerous. Eggplants were called mad apples because people believed they caused insanity. Mushrooms were feared as fairy food that could transport people to other worlds. Even tea faced suspicion as a foreign drink that might corrupt Christian souls. The story of forbidden foods reveals something profound about human nature: our capacity to overcome fear through curiosity, need, and desire. It shows how institutions that claim absolute authority can be wrong about the most basic aspects of human life. Most importantly, it reminds us that the foods we take for granted today were once revolutionary, dangerous, and transformative. Every meal we eat is a small victory over centuries of fear, superstition, and hunger. The next time you bite into a chocolate bar, sip your morning coffee, or enjoy a slice of pizza, remember that you're participating in humanity's long struggle for freedom. Those simple pleasures represent our ancestors' courage to choose life over dogma, curiosity over fear, and joy over suffering. In the end, it wasn't religious faith that triumphed, but human desire. And perhaps that's the most delicious victory of all. If this food history blew your taste buds away, hit that like button, subscribe for more delicious discoveries, and tell us which forbidden food you can't live without in the comments.